Strange and the spooky, adventurous and loony, they're all together ooky, the Bud family. Their trips are amazing when people come to see 'em. They really are amazing, the Bud family. History, ghost, art. So put on a witch's shawl on, a seat so you can relax on. We're gonna play a call on the Bud family. Alright, it is Wednesday, Wayback Wednesday, in the middle of October. Are you ready? This video is about a famous lady. So you'll enjoy that little bit of knowledge and history. Before that, though, we've got a race. Let's see, what kind of race should we do today? Maybe we'll do... let's do witches. None of them are really appropriate for days. Topic. Oh, let's do a monster race. Ready? We're going to do monster race. Alright, here we go. Are you ready? Shout out time. Here's a shout out just for you. You support me, so I support you. This shout out is for our friends. Let's see who it is today. Hold on a minute. Alright, we got everybody lined up. Maybe. There we go. There we go. Alright. Let's see. I see She Stole. I see A&G. I see Richard. I see Cruising Nuts. I see Judy May. I see Debbie. I see Richard. I see Distracted. I see Ohio. I see Northern. Wanya is currently in the lead as Godzilla. Let's see. Ooh, Mark is State Puff Mushroom Man. Let's see. Net, Pinned, Jersey. Crystal, I believe you're a dinosaur. I cannot tell, though. We'll see. Oh, Keep Digging is a monkey. I'm guessing that's supposed to be King Kong. Doesn't really look like King Kong, but, you know, we'll go with it. We got Cal King. Oh, there's Mothman from behind, and it's Haven. At least I think that's supposed to be Mothman. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm always wrong. Oh, Cruising Nuts and the werewolf. Hang on a minute. Cruising Nuts is one of our bigger supporters with 1,100. And it says Mike and Tracy, which I have somehow never seen. I don't think I've ever looked at your guys' description. I just pop into the videos. So now I have names for you people. We're not big bloggers. Really? Have you looked at your channel recently? Or have a lot of live stream talk? I would say that's appropriate. We love to make content and share our traveling experiences, which is great. It's drone footage about cruise ships and some other traveling fun. So this is one of our travel channels, also a drone channel. We own a drone, we just haven't figured it out yet. Hopefully we'll get a chance to figure that out and show you guys some videos of us actually using the thing we've owned for like almost 4 years now. But check out Cruise Nuts if you like cruising, traveling, things like that. Drone footage. They're wonderful, very supportive. And off with your head. All right, Mr. Historian, go ahead.
All right. Class, lend me your ears, or we'll lop off your heads. Just kidding. Today's topic comes to us from the people of France, the place where if you got really bored, you could wind up losing your head. But today's topic comes on the death date of one Marie Antoinette, full name Maria Antonia Josepha Johanna, was actually born on the 2nd of November, 1755, at the Hofburg Palace in Vienna, the Archduchy of Austria, at 8:30 in the evening. Now, she was the youngest daughter of Empress Maria Theresa, ruler of the Habsburg monarchy, and her husband Francis I, the Holy Roman Emperor. Her godparents were Joseph I and Mariana Victoria, the King and Queen of Portugal. Archduke Joseph and Archduchess Maria Anna would act as proxies for their newborn sister. You got to realize, back then, a lot of these royals were all in lineage. You couldn't go from one country to another without running into a relative in the palace. Now, interesting enough, Maria was born on All Souls' Day, a Catholic day of mourning, and during her childhood, her birthday was instead celebrated the day before, on All Saints' Day, due to the connotations of the date. Shortly after her birth, she was placed under the care of the governess of the imperial children, Countess von Bredius. Maria Antonia was raised together with her sister, Maria Carolina of Austria, who was 3 years older, and with whom she had a lifelong close relationship. Maria Antonia had a difficult but ultimately loving relationship with her mother, who referred to as the Little Madame Antoine. Now, Maria Antonia spent her formative years between the Hofburg Palace and Schönbrunn, the imperial summer residence in Vienna, where on the 13th of October 1762, when she was 7, she would run into Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, 2 years her junior and a child prodigy. Now, despite private tutoring she received, the results of her schooling were less than satisfactory. At the age of 10, she could not write correctly in German or any language commonly used at court, such as French or Italian, and conversations with her were stilted. Under the teaching of Christoph Willibald Gluck, Maria Antonia developed into a good musician, though. She learned to play the harp, the harpsichord, and the flute. She sang during family evening gatherings, as she was known to have had a beautiful voice. She also excelled at dancing, had exquisite poise, and loved dolls. Now, the death of her older sister, Maria Josepha, from smallpox during the epidemic in Vienna in October of 1767 made an everlasting impression on the young Maria. Maria Antonia, in her later life, recalled the ailing Maria Josepha taking her in her arms. She told her she would not be traveling to Naples to marry King Ferdinand IV of Naples, to whom she was betrothed, but to the family vault. Later in 1768, Matthieu Jacques de Vermond was dispatched by Louis XV to tutor Marie Antoinette, as she became the future wife to Louis XVI. Serving as an educator, Abbe de Vermond found her to be unsatisfactorily educated and lacking in, at the age of 13, important writing skills. Nonetheless, he also complimented her, stating her character, her heart are excellent. He found her more intelligent than has been generally supposed, but since she is rather lazy and extremely frivolous, she's hard to teach. Now, under the recommendation of Etienne Francois de Choiseul, the Duke of Choiseul, a strong supporter of her prospective marriage, Maria Antonia also received a makeover to bring more in line with the fashion of French royalty. This includes straightening of her teeth by a French dentist, the diversification of her wardrobe, and hairstyles reminiscent of Madame du Pompadour. She was also instructed by Jean-Georges Norbert, who taught her to walk in the gliding fashion characteristic of the court of Versailles. Now, following the 7 Years' War and the diplomatic revolution of 1756, Empress Maria Theresa decided to end hostilities with their longtime enemy, King Louis XV of France. Their common desire to destroy the ambitions of Prussia and Great Britain and to secure a definite peace between their respective countries led them to seal their alliance with a marriage. On the 7th of February, 1770, Louis XV formally requested the hand of Maria Antonia for their eldest surviving grandson and heir, Louis Auguste, Duke of Berry and Dauphin of France. Maria Antonia formally renounced her rights to the Habsburg domains, and on the 19th of April, 1770, she was married by proxy with Louis Auguste at the Augustinian Church in Vienna, with her brother, Archduke Ferdinand, standing in for the Dauphin. On the 14th of May, 1770, she met with her husband at the edge of the forest of Compiègne. Upon the arrival in France, she adopted the French version of her name, Marie Antoinette. A further ceremonial wedding would take place on the 16th of May in 1770 at the Palace of Versailles, and after the festivities, the day ended with the ritual bedding. The couple's longtime failure to consummate the marriage plagued the reputation of the royal couple for the next 7 years.
Oops.
Now, the initial reaction to the marriage between Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI was mixed. On the one hand, the Dauphine was beautiful, personable, and well-liked by the common people. Her first official appearance in Paris on the 8th of June 1773 was a resounding success. On the other hand, those opposed to the alliance with Austria had a difficult relationship with Marie Antoinette, as did others who disliked her for more personal or petty reasons. Now, Madame du Barry proved to be a troublesome foe to the new Dauphine. She was Louis XV's mistress and had considerable political influence over him. In 1770, she was instrumental in ousting Etienne-François, Duc de Choiseul, who helped orchestrate the Franco-Austrian alliance and Marie Antoinette's marriage, and in exiling his sister, the Duchess of Gramont, one of Marie Antoinette's ladies-in-waiting. Marie Antoinette was persuaded by her husband's aunts to refuse to acknowledge du Barry, which some saw as a political blunder that jeopardized Austria's interest in the French court. Marie Antoinette's mother, an Austrian ambassador to France, Comte de Mercy Attendeau, who sent the Emperor's secret reports on Marie Antoinette's behavior, pressured Marie Antoinette to speak to Madame du Barry, which she had grudgingly agreed to do on New Year's Day, 1772. She merely commented to her, "There are a lot of people at Versailles today," but it was enough for Madame du Barry, who was satisfied with this recognition, and the crisis passed. Look, people. Now, 2 days after the death of Louis XV in 1774, Louis XVI exiled du Barry to the Abbey du Pont aux Dames in Meaux, pleasing both his wife and aunts. 2.5 years later, at the end of October of 1776, Madame du Barry's exile ended, and she was allowed to return to her beloved chateau at Louveciennes, but she was never permitted to return to Versailles. You will stay out.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Well, his early years, on the 10th of May, 1774, upon the death of Louis XV, the Dauphine ascended to the throne of King Louis XVI of France and Navarre, with Marie Antoinette as his queen consort. At the outset, the new queen had limited political influence with her husband, who, with the support of the two most important ministers, Chief Minister Maurepas and Foreign Minister Vergennes, blocked several of her candidates from assuming important positions, including Choiseul. The queen did play a decisive role in the disgrace and exile of the most powerful of Louis XV's ministers, the Duc de Legion. On the 24th of May, 1774, 2 weeks after the death of Louis XV, the king gave his king the wife the Petit Tryon, a small chateau on the grounds of Versailles that had been built by Louis XV for his mistress, Madame de Pompadour. Louis XVI allowed Marie Antoinette to renovate it to suit her own taste. Soon rumors circulated she had plastered the walls with gold and diamonds. Gotta get bling. The queen spent heavily on fashion, luxuries, and gambling, though her country was facing a grave financial crisis, and the population was suffering. Rose Bertin created dresses for her and hairstyles such as poofs up to 3 feet high, and the panache, a spray of feather plumes. Now, she and her court also adopted the English fashion of dresses made of indian, a material banned in France from 1686 until 1759 to protect the local French woolen and silk industries, percale, and muslin. As a result of these fashion activities, Marie Antoinette presided over one of the most important and fashionable courts in history, and she was dominant over all of the other ladies of the court. As for her bearing and appearance, the queen was very majestic and charismatic, in spite of the fact that she had gained much weight over the years due to her many pregnancies. Now, by the time of the Flour War in 1775, flour as in white powdery stuff, a series of riots due to the high price of flour and bread had damaged her reputation among the general public. Eventually, Marie Antoinette's reputation was no better than that of the favorites of previous kings. Many French people were beginning to blame her for the degrading economic situation, suggesting the country's inability to pay off its debt was the result of her wasting the crown's money.
No.
In her correspondence, Marie Antoinette's mother, Mary Theresa, expressed concern over her daughter's spending habits, citing the civil unrest that was beginning to cause. As soon as 1774, Marie Antoinette had begun did befriend some of the male admirers, such as Baron Vessenal, the Duke de Coligny, and the Count Valentine Esterhazy, and also formed deep friendships with various ladies of the court. Most noted was Maria Louise, Princess de Lamballe, related to the royal family through the marriage into the Penthieville family. On the 19th of September 1774, she appointed her superintendent of the household, an appointment she soon transferred to her new favorite, the Duchess of Polignac. In 1774, she took under her patronage her former music teacher, the German opera composer Christoph Waldemar Gluck, who remained in France until 1779. Now, amidst the atmosphere, a wave of libels, the Holy Roman Emperor Joseph II came to France incognito, using the name Comte de Falkenstein, for a 6-week visit in which he toured Paris extensively and was a guest at Versailles. He met his sister and her husband, 18th of April 1777, at the Chateau de la Meute, and spoke frankly to his brother-in-law, curious as to why the royal marriage had not been consummated, arriving to the conclusion that no obstacle to the couple's conjugal relations existed save for the Queen's lack of interest and the King's unwillingness to exert himself.
Oh, no, I don't want it.
I don't want it. In a letter to his brother Leopold, Grand Duke of Tuscany, Joseph II described as a couple of complete blunderers. He disclosed to Leopold that the inexperienced, then only 22 years old, Louis XVI, had confided in him the course of action that had been undertaken in their marital bed, saying Louis XVI introduces the member, but then stays there without moving for about 2 minutes, withdraws without completing the act, and bids good night.
Well then.
Aren't you romantic?
That sounds exciting.
Yes. Suggestion that Louis suffered from pismosis, which is relieved by circumcision, has been discredited. Nevertheless, following Joseph's intervention, the marriage was finally consummated in August of 1777. Late months later, April 1778, it was suspected that the Queen was pregnant, which was officially announced on the 16th of May. Marie Antoinette's daughter, Marie Therese Charlotte, Madame Royale, was born in Versailles on the 19th of December, 1778. The child's paternity was contested in the labels, as were all her children's.
Well then.
These people can't be satisfied for anything. In the middle of the Queen's pregnancy, 2 events occurred that had a profound effect on her later life. The return of her best friend, the Swedish diplomat Count Axel von Versen the Younger, to Versailles for 2 years, and her brother's claim to the throne of Bavaria, contested by the Habsburg monarchy in Prussia. Now, Marie Antoinette pleaded with her husband for the French to intercede on behalf of Austria. The peace at Teschen, signed on the 13th of May, 1779, ended the brief conflict, with the Queen imposing French mediation at her mother's insistence, and Austria gaining the intervarial territory of at least 100,000 inhabitants, a strong retreat from the early French possession, which was hostile towards Austria. This gave the impression, partially justified, that the Queen had sided with Austria against France. Ouch! Meanwhile, the Queen began to institute changes in court customs. Some of them met with disapproval of the older generation, such as the abandonment of heavy makeup and the popular wide-hooped panniers. The new fashion called for a simpler feminine look, typified by the rustic layered muslin dress Marie Antoinette wore in a 1783 Le Brun portrait. In 1780, she began to participate in amateur plays and musicals in the Théâtre de la Reine, built for her by Richard Macquis. Now, repayment of the French debt remained a difficult problem, further exasperated by Vergennes and also by Marie Antoinette's prodding. Louis XVI, to involve France in the American Revolutionary War, the primary motive for the Queen's involvement in political affairs in this period, may arguably have been more to do with the court factionalism than any true interest on her part in politics themselves, but she played an important role in aiding the American Revolution by securing Austrian and Russian support for France, which resulted in the establishment of the First League of Armed Neutrality that stopped Britain's attack, and by weighing in decisively for the nomination of Philippe Henri, Marquis de Ségur, as Minister of War, and Charles-Eugene Gabriel Delacroix as Secretary of the Navy in 1780, which helped George Washington defeat the British in the American Revolutionary War, which ended in 1783.
Cool.
Now, Marie Antoinette's second pregnancy ended with a miscarriage in early July 1779, as confirmed by letters between the Queen and her mother, although some historians believe that she may have experienced bleeding related to an irregular menstrual cycle, which she mistook as a lost pregnancy. Her third pregnancy was affirmed in March of 1781, and on the 22nd of October she gave birth to Louis Joseph Xavier Francois, Dauphin of France. Empress Maria Theresa died on the 29th of November, 1780, in Vienna. Marie Antoinette feared that the death of her mother would jeopardize the Franco-Austrian alliance, as well as, ultimately, herself, but her brother, Joseph II, Holy Roman Emperor, wrote to her that he had no intention of breaking the alliance. Now, second visit from Joseph II, which took place in July of 1781, was to reaffirm the Franco-Austrian alliance, and also to see his sister was tainted by false rumors that Marie Antoinette was sending money to him from the French treasury.
Well then.
Now, despite the general celebration over the birth of her heir, Marie Antoinette's political influence, such as it was perceived to be greatly benefiting from Austria. During the Kettle War, which her brother Joseph attempted to open the Schlett River for naval passage, Marie Antoinette succeeded in obliging Vergennes to pay huge financial compensation to Austria. Finally, the Queen was able to obtain her brother's support from Great Britain in the American Revolution, and she neutralized French hostility to the alliance with Russia. In 1782, after the governess of the royal children, the Princess de Guienne, went bankrupt and resigned, Marie Antoinette appointed her favorite, the Duchess of Polignac, to the position. This decision was met with disapproval from the court, as the Duchess was considered to be of too modest origins to occupy such an exalted position. How dare they?
Right.
In contrast, both the King and Queen trusted Madame de Polignac completely and gave her a 13-room apartment in Versailles and paid her well. The entire Polignac family benefited greatly from royal favor and titles and positions, but its sudden wealth and lavish lifestyle outraged most aristocratic families who resented the Polignac's dominance at court, and also fueled an increasing popular disapproval of Marie Antoinette, mostly in Paris. De Mercy wrote the Empress, "It is almost unexampled that in so short a time a royal favor should have brought such overwhelming advantages to a family." In June of 1783, Marie Antoinette's new pregnancy was announced, but on the 9th of the 1st and 2nd of November, her 28th birthday, she suffered a miscarriage.
Oh dear.
In 1783, the Queen would play a decisive role in the nomination of Charles Alexander de Calonne, a close friend of the Polignacs, as Controller General of the Finances, and of the Baron de Breteuil as the Minister of the Royal Household, making him perhaps the strongest and most conservative member of the reign. The result of these two nominations was that Marie Antoinette's influences became paramount in the government, and the new ministers rejected any major change to the structure of the old regime. More than that, the decree by de Séguier, the Minister of War, requiring 4 quarterings of nobility as a condition for the appointment of officers, mainly served the interest of older noble families, including poorer provincial ones, who were widely seen as reactionary interest groups by ambitious members of the recent nobility and even the Parisian populace and press. The measure also blocked the access of commoners, mainly sons of members of the professional classes, and more recently elevated nobility to important positions in the armed forces. As such, the decree became an important grievance of social classes that had been habitually supportive of the monarchy and established order, which went on to supply the bulk of early leadership in the French Revolution. Now, Count Axel von Fürsten, after his return from America in 1783, June, was accepted into the Queen's private society. There were claims that the two were romantically involved, but since most of their correspondence had been lost, destroyed, or redacted for many years, there was no conclusive evidence. However, in 2016, the Daily Telegraph Center for Research and Restoration of Museums in France used cutting-edge X-ray and different infrared scanners and deciphered letters from her that proved the affair. Around this time, pamphlets describing racial sexual deviance, including the Queen and her friends in the court, were growing in popularity around the country. The Portfolio de Talon Rouge was one of the earliest, including the Queen and a variety of other nobles and political statements decrying the immoral practices of the court. As the time went on, as these came to focus more on the Queen, they described amorous encounters with a wide range of figures, from the Duchess of Polignac to Louis XV. As these attacks increased, they were connected with the public's dislike of her association with the rival nation of Austria. The public suggested that her supposed behavior was learned from the Austrian court, particularly lesbianism, which was known as a German vice.
Ooh.
How dare they? Her mother once again concerned safety for her daughter, and she began to use Austria's ambassador to France, Comte de Mercy, to provide information on Marie Antoinette's safety and movements. In 1783, the Queen was busy with the creation of Hamlet, a rustic retreat built by favorite architect Richard Muke, according to the designs of the painter Hubert Robert. The creation, however, caused another uproar when its cost became widely known. She seems to like to blow through money like crazy.
Yeah, she definitely was a shopper.
Yeah. However, the Hamlet was not an eccentricity of Marie Antoinette's. It was in vogue at the time for nobles to have recreations of small villages on their properties. In fact, the design was copied from that of Louis Joseph, Prince of Condé. It was also significantly smaller and less intricate than many other nobles. Around this time, here you go, she had accumulated a library of 5,000 books.
Woo!
Those on music, all often dedicated to her, were the most read, though she also liked to read history. She sponsored the arts, in particular music. Marie Antoinette preferred to hold her musicales in the salon of her Petit Apartment de la Reine, in the Palace of Versailles, or in the Theatre de la Reine. She limited the audience to her intimate circle and a few musicians, among them the Chevalier de St. Georges, admitted to perform music with the Queen. St. Georges probably played his violin sonatas for two instruments, with Her Majesty playing the forte piano. She also supported some scientific endeavors, encouraging and witnessing the first launch of the Montgolfier, a hot air balloon for the first time in human history. This extraordinary feat, which represented a turning point in human civilization, was done by Jean-François Paltret de Rozier. Now, on the 27th of April, 1784, Pierre Beauchemin's play, The Marriage of Figaro, premiered in Paris. Initially banned by the king due to its negative portrayal of nobility, the play was finally allowed to be publicly performed because of the Queen's support and its overwhelming popularity at court, where secret readings of it had been given by Marie Antoinette. The play was a disaster for the image of the monarchy and aristocracy. It inspired Mozart's The Marriage of Figaro, which premiered in Vienna on the 1st of May, 1786. Now, on the 24th of October, 1784, putting the Baron de Breteuil in charge of the acquisition, Louis XVI bought the Château de St. Cloud from Louis Philippe I, Duke of Orléans, in the name of his wife, which she wanted due to the expanding family. She wanted to be able to own her own property, one which was actually hers, which would have the authority to bequeath it to whichever child I wish. Choosing the child, she thought, could use it rather than going through patriarchal inheritance laws or whims. It was proposed that the cost could be covered by other sales, such as that of the Chateau Tempiet in Bordeaux. This was unpopular, particularly with those factions of the nobility who disliked the Queen, but also with the growing percentage of the population who disapproved of the Queen of France independently owning a private residence. The purchase of St. Cloud thus damaged the public's image of the Queen even further. The chapeau's high price, almost 6 million livres, plus the substantial extra cost of redecorating, ensured much less money was going towards repaying France's substantial debt.
What?
Now, 27th of March, 1785, Marie Antoinette gave birth to a second son, Louis Charles, who bore the title of Duke of Normandy. The fact that the birth occurred exactly 9 months after his return did not escape the attention of many, leading to doubt the parentage of the child and noticeable decline of the Queen's reputation in public opinion. The majority of Marie Antoinette and Louis the 17th biographers believe that the young prince was the biological son of Louis XVI, including Stéphane Zelig and Antonia Fraser, who believed that Ferdinand and Marie Antoinette were indeed romantically involved. Fraser had also noted that the birth date matches up perfectly with a known conjugal visit from the king.
Now, courtiers at Versailles noted in their diaries that the date of the child's conception corresponded perfectly with the period when the king and queen had spent much time together, but these details were ignored among attacks on the queen's character. These suspicions of illegitimacy, along with the continued publication of the libels and never-ending cavalcades of court intrigues, the actions of Joseph II in the Cattle War and the purchase of St. Cloud, and the affair of the diamond necklace, combined to turn popular opinion sharply against the queen, and the image of a licentious spendthrift, empty-headed foreign queen was quickly taking root in the French psyche. The second daughter, the last child, Marie Sophie Helen Vitry, Madame Sophie, was born on the 9th of July in 1786 and lived only 11 months until the 19th of June in 1787. She was named after the king's aunt, Princess Sophie of France. Now, Marie Antoinette began to abandon her more carefree activities and became increasingly involved in politics in her role as Queen of France. By publicly showing her attention to education and care of her children, the Queen sought to improve this dissolute image that she had acquired from the diamond necklace affair, in which public opinion had falsely accused her of criminal participation in defrauding the jewelers Boehmer and Bassage in the price of an expensive diamond necklace they had originally created for Madame du Barry. The main actors in the scandal were the Cardinal de Rohan, Prince de Rohan-Guilmaine, General Almoner of France, and Jean de Valsoy-Saint-Remy, Countess de Lamont, a descendant of the illegitimate child of Henry II of France and the House of Valois. Marie had profoundly disliked Rohan since the time when he was the French ambassador to Vienna when she was a child. Despite the high clerical position in the court, she never addressed a word to him. Others involved were Nicole Lequet, alias Baron d'Olivia, a prostitute who happened to look out like Marie Antoinette, Rieux de Villette, a forger, Elsa de Castroglio, an Italian adventurer, and the Count de Lamont, Jeanne de Lavoie's husband. A lot of funky names. Now, Madame de Lamont tricked Rohan into buying a necklace as a gift for Marie Antoinette for him to gain the Queen's favor. When the affair was discovered, those involved, except for de Lamont and Ratois de Villette, who both managed to flee, were arrested, tried, convicted, and either imprisoned or exiled. Marie de Lamont was sentenced to life confinement in the Petit Servet Hospital, which also served as a prison for women. Judged by Parliament of Paris, Rohan was found innocent of any wrongdoing and allowed to leave the Bastille. Marie Antoinette, who had insisted on the arrest of the cardinal, was dealt a heavy personal blow, as was the monarchy, and despite the fact that the guilty parties were tried and convicted, the affair proved to be extremely damaging to her reputation, which never recovered from it. Now, suffering from an acute case of depression, the king began to seek advice of his wife. In her new role, with increasing political power, the queen tried to improve the awkward situation brewing between Parliament and the king. This change of the queen's position signaled the end of the Polignacs' influence and impact on the finances of the crown. Continuing deterioration of the financial situation, despite cutbacks to the royal retinue and court expenses, ultimately forced the king, the queen, and the Controller General of Finances, Charles-Alexandre de Calonne, at the urging of Vizernus, to call a session of the Assembly of Notables after a hiatus of 160 years. The assembly was held for the purpose of initiating necessary financial reforms, but the assembly refused to cooperate. The first meeting took place on the 22nd of February, 1787, 9 days after the death of Vergennes on the 13th of February. Marie Antoinette did not attend the meeting, and in her absence resulted in accusations the Queen was trying to undermine its purpose. The assembly was a failure. It did not pass any reforms and instead fell into a pattern of defying the king. On the urging of the Queen, Louis XVI dismissed Cologne on the 8th of April, 1787. Now, the 1st of May, 1787, Etienne Charles de Lamont de Brenne, Archbishop of Toulouse and one of the Queen's political allies, was appointed by the king at her urging to replace Cologne, first as Controller General of the Finances and then as Chief Minister. He began to institute more cutbacks at court, while trying to restore royal absolute power weakened by Parliament. Brienne was unable to improve the financial situation, and since he was the Queen's ally, this failure adversely affected her political position. The continued poor financial climate of the country resulted in the 25th of May dissolution of the Assembly of Notables because the inability to function and its lack of solutions was blamed on the Queen. Hey, these guys blew it. Let's blame her. France's financial problems were the result of a combination of factors. Several expensive wars, large royal family whose expenses were paid by the state, and an unwillingness to part on most of the members of the privileged classes, aristocracy, and clergy to help defray the costs of the government out of their own pockets by relinquishing some of the financial privileges. Basically, how many times can you rob the same piggy bank?
6.
Yeah. As a result of the public perception that she had single-handedly ruined the national finances, Marie Antoinette was given the nickname of Madame Deficit in the summer of 1787.
Ooh,
That's gotta hurt. While the sole fault of the financial crisis did not lie with her, Marie Antoinette was its biggest obstacle to any major reform effort. She had played a decisive role in the distance of the reform ministers of finance, and Robert Jacques Turgot in 1776, and Jacques Necker, the first dismissal in 1781. If the secret expenses of the Queen were taken into account, court expenses were much higher than the official estimate of 7% of the state's budget.
Whoops.
Now, the Queen attempted to fight back with propaganda portraying her as a caring mother, most notably by the painting of Elizabeth Virgin Lebrun, exhibited at the Royal Academy Salon de Paris in 1787 August, showing her with children. Around the same time, Jeanette de Vauzat Saint-Remy escaped from prison, fleeing to London, where she published damaging slander concerning her supposed amorous affair with the Queen. Now, the political situation in 1787 worsened when Marie Antoinette's urging the Parliament of Paris was exiled to Troyes on the 15th of August. It further deteriorated when Louis XVI tried to use a writ de justice on the 11th of November to impose legislation. The new Duke of Orleans publicly protested this king's actions and was subsequently exiled to the Chateau de Villiers-Cortet. The May edicts issued on the 8th of May, 1788, were also opposed by the public and Parliament. And finally, on the 8th of August, Louis XVI announced the intention to bring back the Estates General, the traditional elected legislature of the country, which had not been convened since 1614. Now, while from late 1787 up to his death in 1789, Marie Antoinette's primary concern was the continued deterioration of the health of the Delphine, who had suffered from tuberculosis. She was directly involved in the exile of Parliament, the May edicts, and the announcement regarding the Estates General. She did participate in the King's Council, the first queen to do this in over 175 years, since Marie de Medici had been named Chief Counsel du Roi between 1614 and 1617. She was making the major decisions behind the scene and in the Royal Council. Marie Antoinette was instrumental in the reinstatement of Jacques Necker as finance minister in 1788, a popular move, even though she herself was worried it would go against her if Necker proved unsuccessful in reforming the country's finances. She accepted Necker's proposition to double the representation of the Third Estate in an attempt to check the power of the aristocracy. Now, on the eve of opening of the Estates General, the Queen attended a mass celebrating its return. As soon as it opened on the 5th of May, 1789, the fracture between the democratic Third Estate, consisting of the bourgeois and the radical Christians, and the conservative nobility of the Second Estate widened, and Marie Antoinette knew that her rival, the Duke of Orleans, who had given money and bread to the people during the winter, would be acclaimed by the crowd, much to her deterrent. The death of the Dauphin on the 4th of June, which deeply affected his parents, was virtually ignored by the French people, who instead were preparing for the next meeting of the Estates General and hoping for a resolution to the bread crisis. As the Third Estate decided to take a national assembly and took the tennis court oath, and as people either spread or believed rumors that the Queen wished to bathe in their blood, Marie Antoinette went into mourning for her eldest son.
Oh no.
Her role was decisive in urging the king to remain firm not to concede to popular demands for reforms. In addition, she showed her determination to use force to crush the forthcoming revolution. Now, situation would escalate on the 20th of June, and the Third Estate, which had been joined by several members of the clergy and radical nobility, found the door to the appointed meeting place closed by order of the king. It thus met at the tennis court in Versailles and took the tennis court oath to not separate before it was given a constitution to the nation. On the 11th of June, at Marie Antoinette's urging, Necker was dismissed and replaced by Berthoud, a queen's choice to crush the revolution with mercenary Swiss troops under the command of one of her favorites, Pierre Victor, Baron de Bessemont de Besnard. At the news, Paris was besieged by riots, which culminated in the storming of the Bastille on the 14th of July. On the 15th, Gilbert de Montier, Marquis de Lafayette, was named Commander-in-Chief of the newly formed National Guard.
Oops.
In the days that followed the storming of the Bastille, for fear of assassination and ordered by the king, the emigration of members of the high aristocracy began on the 17th of June with the departure of Count of Artois, the Condits, the cousins of the king, and the unpopular Polignacs. Mary Antoinette, whose life was as much in danger, remained with her king, whose power was greatly being taken away by the National Constituent Assembly. The abolition of feudal privileges by the National Constituent Assembly on the 4th of August, 1789, and the Declaration of Rights of Man and of the Citizen, drafted by Lafayette with the help of Thomas Jefferson and adopted on the 26th of August, paved the way for a constitutional monarchy. Despite these dramatic changes, life at the court continued, while the situation in Paris was becoming critical as bread shortages in September. On the 5th of October, a crowd in Paris descended on Versailles and forced the royal family to move to the Tuileries Palace in Paris, where they lived under a form of house arrest under the watch of Lafayette's National Guard, while the Court of Provence and his wife were allowed to reside in the Petit Luxembourg, where they remained until they went into exile on the 20th of June, 1791. Now, Marie Antoinette continued to perform charitable functions and attend religious ceremonies, but dedicated most of her time to her children. She also played an important political, albeit not public, role between 1789 and 1791, when she had a complex set of relationships with several key actors in the early period of the French Revolution. One of the most important was Necker, the Prime Minister of Finances. Despite her dislike of him, she played a decisive role in his return to the office. She blamed him for the support of the revolution and did not regret his resignation in 1790. Now, Lafayette, one of the former military leaders of the American War of Independence, served as warden for the royal family in his position as Commander-in-Chief of the National Guard. Despite his dislike of the Queen, he detested her as much as she detested him, and at one time even threatened to send her to a convent. He was persuaded by the mayor of Paris, Jean-Sylvain Bailly, to work and collaborate with her, and allowed her to see Fersen a number of times. He even went as far as to exiling the Duke of Orleans, who was accused by the Queen of fomenting trouble. His relationship with the king was more cordial. As a liberal aristocrat, he did not want the fall of the monarchy, but rather the establishment of a liberal one, similar to that of Great Britain, based on cooperation between the king and the people, which was defined in the Constitution of 1791. Now, despite of her attempts to remain out of the public eye, Marie Antoinette was falsely accused in the libels of having an affair with Lafayette, whom she loathed, and was published in the Gametier Royal, the royal dildo, as having a sexual relationship with the English Baroness Lady Sophie Farrell of Barmouth, a well-known lesbian at the time. Publication of such calumnies continued to the end, climaxing with the trial with an accusation of incest with her son.
Well then.
There's no evidence to support these accusations. Now, a significant achievement of Marie Antoinette in that period was the establishment of an alliance with Henri Gabriel Reclus, Comte de Mirabeau, the most important lawmaker in the Assembly. Like Lafayette, Mirabeau was a liberal aristocrat. He had joined the Third Estate, which was not against the monarchy, but wanted to reconcile it with the Revolution. He also wanted to be a minister and was not immune to corruption. On the advice of Mercy, Marie Antoinette opened secret negotiations with him and both agreed to meet privately at the Chateau de St. Cloud on the 3rd of July, 1790, where the royal family was allowed to spend the summer free of the radical elements that watched their every move in Paris. At the meeting, Mirabeau was impressed by the Queen and remarked in a letter to Augustine Marie Raymond de Amberg, Comte de Lamarck, that she was the only person the king had by him. Le reine instant sur homme lequi la right al stupid du lit. An agreement was reached, turning Mirabeau into one of her political allies. Marie Antoinette promised to pay him 6,000 livres per month and 1 million if he succeeded in his mission to restore the king's authority. Now, the only time that the royal couple returned to Paris in that period was on the 14th of July to attend the Fête de la Fédération, an official ceremony held at the Champ de Mars in commemoration of the fall of the Bastille 1 year earlier. At least 300,000 persons participated from all over France, including 18,000 National Guards, with Talleyrand, Bishop of Autun, celebrating a mass of the altar of the fatherland. The king was greeted with the event with loud cheers of "Long live the king," especially when he took the oath to protect the nation and to enforce the laws voted by the Constitutional Assembly. There were even cheers for the queen, particularly when she presented the Dauphin to the public. Mirabeau sincerely wanted to reconcile the queen with the people, and she was happy to see him restoring much of the king's powers, such as his authority over foreign policy and his right to declare war. Over the objections of Lafayette and his allies, the king was given a suspensive veto, allowing him to veto any laws for a period of 4 years. With time, Mirabeau would support the queen even more, going as far as to suggest that Louis XVI adjourn to Rouen or Compiègne. This leverage with the Assembly ended with the death of Mirabeau in April of 1791, despite the attempt of several moderate leaders of the revolution to contact the Queen to establish some basis of cooperation with her. Now, in March of 1791, Pope Pius IV had condemned the civil constitution of the clergy, reluctantly was signed by Louis XVI, which reduced the number of bishops from 132 to 93, imposed the election of bishop and all members of the clergy by department or district assemblies of electors, and reduced the Pope's authority over the Church. Religion played an important part in the life of Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI, both raised by the Roman Catholic faith. The Queen's political ideas and her beliefs in the absolute power of monarchies was based on France's long-established tradition of the divine right of kings. On the 18th, as the royal family prepared to leave for St. Cloud to attend Easter Mass celebrated by a refractionary priest, a crowd, soon joined the National Guard, disobeying Lafayette's orders, prevented their departure from Paris, prompting Marie Antoinette to declare to Lafayette that she and her family were no longer free. This incident fortified her in the determination to leave Paris for personal and political reasons, not alone, but with her family. Even the king, who had been hesitant, accepted his wife's decision to flee with the help of foreign powers and counter-revolutionary forces. Fersen and Vittori, who represented her in the courts of Europe, were put in charge of the escape plan, with Marie Antoinette continued her negotiations with some of the moderate fighters of the French Revolution. Now, there were several plots designed to help the royal family escape, which the Queen had rejected because she would not leave without the king, and which had ceased to be viable because of the king's indecision. Once Louis XVI failed to commit to a plan, its poor execution was the cause of its failure. In an elaborate attempt known as the Flight to Versailles to reach a royalist stronghold in Montmey, some members of the royal family were to pose as servants for an imaginary Meme de Cour, a wealthy Russian baroness, a role played by Louise Elizabeth de Croix-Trouzet, governess of the royal children. After many delays, the escape was attempted on the 21st of June, 1791, but the entire family was arrested less than 24 hours later at Varennes and taken back to Paris within a week. The escape attempt destroyed much of the remaining support for the population of the king. Upon learning of the capture of the royal family, the National Constituent Assembly sent 3 representatives, Antoine Barbier, Jerome Piton de Villiers, and Charles Caesar de la Fay left Montbert to Versailles to escort Marie Antoinette and her family back to Paris. Along the way to the capital, they were jeered and insulted by the people as never before. The prestige of French monarchy had never been at such a low level. During the trip, Barnevard, the representative of the moderate party of the assembly, protected Marie Antoinette from the crowds, and even Piton took pity on the royal family. Brought safely back to Paris, they were met by silence by the crowds. Thanks to Barnevard, the royal couple was not brought to trial and was publicly exonerated of any crime in relation to the attempted escape. Marie Antoinette's first lady of the bedchamber, Jenny Louise Henriette Campan, wrote about what happened to the Queen's hair on the night of the 22nd of June. In a single night, it had turned white as that of a 70-year-old woman. Now, after their return to Versailles and until the storming of the Tuileries on the 10th of August, 1792, the Queen, her family, and entourage were held under tight surveillance by the National Guard in Tuileries, where the royal couple were guarded night and day. 4 guards accompanied the Queen wherever she went, and her bedroom door had to be left open at night. Her health began to deteriorate, further reducing her physical activities. On the 17th of July, 1791, with the support of Barnevard and his friends, Lafayette's Garde Nationale opened fire on a crowd that assembled at the Champ de Mars to sign a petition demanding the deposition of the king. An estimated number of those killed varied between 12 and 50. Lafayette's reputation never recovered from this event, and on the 8th of October, he resigned as commander of the National Guard. Their enmity continuing, Marie Antoinette played a decisive role in defeating him in his aims to become the mayor of Paris in 1791. As her correspondence shows, when Barnevard was taking great political risks in the belief that the Queen was his political ally and had managed, despite her unpopularity, to secure a moderate majority ready to work with her, Marie Antoinette was not considered sincere in her cooperation with the moderate leaders of the French Revolution, which ultimately ended any chance to establish a moderate government. Moreover, the view of the unpopular Queen was controlling the king further degraded the royal couple's outstandings with the people, which was Jacobins successfully exploited after the return from France to advance their radical agenda to abolish the monarchy. This situation lasted till the spring of 1792. Marie Antoinette continued to hope that the military coalition of the European kingdoms would succeed in crushing the revolution. She counted most on her support of the Austrian family. After the death of her younger brother, Joseph II, in 1790, his successor and younger brother, Leopold II, was willing to support her to a limited degree. It was the hope that the threat of Austria's advancing military would deter further escalation of revolutionary violence. In a letter to her brother, penned in September of 1791, Marie Antoinette expressed how she expected the revolution to react. It will be affected by the approach of war, and not by the war itself. The king, his powers restored, will be entrusted with negotiations with the foreign powers, and the princes will return with the general tranquility to reassure their ranks at his court and the nation. In the same letter, she wrote that the fall of France's monarchy and subsequent rise of revolutionary principles would be destructive to all governments. Now, upon Leopold's death in 1792, his son Francis, a conservative ruler, was ready to support the cause of the French royal couple more vigorously because he feared the consequences of the French Revolution and its ideas on the monarchies of Europe, especially for Austria's influence in the continent. Well, Barnevard advised the Queen to call back Mercy, who had played such an important role in her life before the Revolution, but Mercy had been appointed to another foreign diplomatic position and could not return to France. By the end of 1791, ignoring the danger she faced, Princess de Lamballe, who was in London, returned to the Tuileries. As for Francis, despite the strong restrictions imposed on the Queen, was able to see her a final time in February of 1792. Marie Antoinette would finally wind up facing her own demons, if you will. She would wind up going before a revolutionary tribunal on October the 14th, 1793. Some historians believe that the outcome of the trial was decided in advance by the Committee of Public Safety around the time of the Carnation Plot was uncovered.
Oops.
She and her lawyers were given less than 1 day to prepare her defense. Among these accusations, many previously published in the libels were orchestrating orgies in Versailles, sending millions of lives to the livers of treasury money to Austria, planning the massacre of the National Guards in 1792, declaring her son to be the new King of France, and incest, a charge made by her son Louis Charles, pressured into doing so by the radical James Herbert, who controlled him. Now, the last accusation drew an emotional response from Marie Antoinette, who refused to respond to this charge, instead appealing to all mothers present in the room. Their reaction comforted her, since these women were not otherwise sympathetic to her. Upon being pressed further by a juror to address the accusation, the Queen replied, "If I did not respond, it was because it would be against nature for a mother to reply to such an accusation. On this appeal to all mothers who may be here, when a juror, Joachim Lavat, told Robespierre of this over dinner, Robespierre broke his plate in anger, declaring, 'That imbecile Herbert.'" Yes, he was. Now, early on the 16th of October, Marie Antoinette was declared guilty of the 3 main charges against her: depletion of the national treasury, conspiracy against the internal and external security of the state, and high treason because of her intelligence activities in the interest of the enemy. The latter charge alone was enough to condemn her to death. At worst, the lawyers had expected life imprisonment. In the hours left to her, she composed a letter to her sister-in-law, Madame Elizabeth, affirming her clear conscience, her Catholic faith, and her love and concern for her children. The letter did not reach Elizabeth.
Of course not.
Her will was part of the collection of papers of Robespierre found under her bed and was published by Edmond Bonaventure Courtois. Preparing her execution, she wanted to change clothes in front of her guards. She wanted to wear a black dress, but was forced to wear a plain white dress, white being the color worn by widowed queens of France. Her hair was shorn, her hands bound painfully behind her back, and she was put on a rope leash. Unlike her husband, who had been taken to his execution in a carriage, she had to sit in an open cart for an hour.
I like how he gets the royal treatment, literally, and she gets treated like trash.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah. She was taken to sit in an open cart for an hour. It took to convey her from the concierge via the Rue Saint-Honoré thoroughfare to reach the guillotine, erected in Le Concorde, in the place of the revolution. She maintained her composure despite the insults of a jeering crowd. A constitutional priest was assigned to hear her final confession. He sat by her in the cart, but she ignored him all the way to the scaffold, as he had pledged his allegiance to the Republic. Marie Antoinette would be executed by beheading at the guillotine at 12:15 on the 16th of October during the French Revolution. Her last words are recorded in, "Pardon me, sir, I did not do it on purpose," or in French, "Pardonnez-moi, monsieur, je ne l'ai pas fait exprès," after accidentally stepping on the executioner's shoe.
Oops.
Marie Tossade was employed to make a death mask of her head, and her body was thrown into an unmarked grave in the Madeleine Cemetery, located close by Rue des Noirs. Because its capacity was exhausted, the cemetery was closed the following year on the 25th of March, 1794.
Well then.
And interestingly enough, after her death, Marie Antoinette became a symbol abroad and a controversial figure of the French Revolution. Some used her as a scapegoat to blame on the events of the Revolution. Thomas Jefferson, writing in 1821, claimed that her inordinate gambling and dissipations, along with those of Count Dubois and others of her clique, had been a sensible item in the exhaustion of the treasury, which called into action the reforming hand of the nation. Her opposition to it, her inflexible perverseness, and dauntless spirit led herself to the guillotine, adding that I have ever believed that had there been no queen, there would have been no revolution.
Well then.
And in her 1790 treatise, Reflections on Revolution in France, which was written during her imprisonment in Paris, but prior to execution, Edmund Burke lamented that the age of chivalry is gone. That is, sophisters, economists, and calculators have succeeded, and the glory of Europe is extinguished forever, and now, never more, shall we behold the generous loyalty to rank and sex. After receiving the news, Maria Carolina, Queen of Naples and close sister to Marie Antoinette, spiraled into a state of mourning and in anger against revolutionaries. She quickly suspended protections of reformers and intellectuals in Naples, allowed Neapolitan bishops whose wide latitude to halt the secularization of the country, and offered succor to the overflowing number of immigrants fleeing from the revolutionary France, many of whom were granted pensions. Now, both Marie Antoinette's and Louis XVI's bodies were exhumed on the 18th of January, 1815, during the Bourbon Restoration, when the court of Provence ascended the newly established throne as Louis XVIII, King of France and of Navarre. Christian burial of the royal remains took place 3 days later on the 21st of January in the necropolis of French kings in the Basilica of Saint Denis. But that is the date that we have for Marie Antoinette, and she met her end at the guillotine and was properly buried in 1815. But this has been Bud for the Bud Files, the Bearded Historian. You folks have a good week, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Maybe we'll learn something new.
Yes.
Or not.
Or not.